Thank you again, Dr. Bruinsma, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, Monty, for lining up the questions. One really detail I'd like to jump in and just say, I can't contain myself. Spong talks a lot about Tillich's definition of God as the ground of being, right? Tillich, in his systematic theology, gives that 126 pages. He gives God as spiritual presence 171 pages. I think we need to hear about Tillich's notion of spiritual presence at least as much as we hear about God as the ground of being. So that I have that little bone to chew. McKinley, did you want to say something before we move on? I don't see or hear McKinley. Okay, over to Monty.
Okay, I have 3 people in the queue so far. I've got Stephen, and then Anastasia, and then Rod. And so, Stephen.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for this presentation. It's very important that we hear different voices like this, because in my view, iron sharpens iron. And we need these discussions in order to further get clarity in our own thinking about what it is we believe and why. And so from that perspective, this is a very informative and very helpful discussion. Like Bishop Spong, I too have a master's in divinity, but mine is from a more Protestant, what I consider a conservative Protestant perspective, American Baptist, and prior to getting my doctorate in clinical psych. And my observation, and which leads me to my question, my observation is that Bishop Spong, because of his personal experience, has really arrived at a place of secularism, devoid of what we would consider classic Christian belief, and that his own experience has led him to view the church as a specific social agency that is designed, or should be designed, or whose mission should be to address the inequalities that he experienced and were very prevalent in his growing up and continue in many forms today. So my question is this: given in any of his writings, does he, or where does he bring up the concept of love as a driving force behind these, to address these inequalities? And it appears to me that he's basically jettisoned the Christian faith in terms of addressing these inequalities, but rather let the inequalities shape his vision of what the church needs to do to address them, absent of what we consider the classic fundamentals of Christian faith. Am I in the ballpark here? And where, if he does, how does he bring in the whole element of love as the driving force behind how we address these inequalities and treating those that are in exile?
Yeah. I have not read all of his books, so I cannot really answer the question as to what extent he, in some of his books, would speak about the element of love. But my sense is, from what I have read, that his emphasis is in particular on the element of equality. And that is clear when he is addressing racial issues, when he is addressing gender issues, and when he is addressing the status of women. So I don't think, at least from what I have read, that he emphasizes the element of love very specifically and constantly. He mentions it, but and that may be something that we could find him, we could criticize him for, because after all, love is the fundamental Christian principle. I think that you are right in the sense that he moved to a very large extent into making the church a social
Agency.
social concern, and well, I think, and I don't know whether you agree with me, but we have certainly in some places in the world and in part of our history insufficiently thought to inspire people to change and to fight for equality and to be involved with social issues. The point is, I think that the balance must be there. Spong did not find that balance, I think. He went overboard. Well, I wouldn't say he emphasized it too much, these various social issues or moral issues, but he lost his Christian motivation for doing so in the process. We sometimes, I think, have been so involved with our theology and being correct in our theology that we forgot to make sure that our belief actually would make changes in society and in the way we looked at society and the way we would deal with people in society. So it's a matter of trying to find that balance. And yeah.
So my follow-up is very quick, because he says the heart cannot worship what the mind rejects. And with that, there is an entire rejection of anything mystical, which in my faith as an Orthodox Christian is a vital element, because we in this experience we cannot. We are told in Scripture, now we see through a glass darkly, then we will see face to face, which tells me that, of course, there are things we don't understand, can't comprehend, because God being the truly, fully unknowable in this experience. And as a consequence, I think that, and I'm asking the question, where do you see him then coming down on that in terms of he's trading audiences, because there is a great number of people in the Christian faith already that do believe in the mystical, and he basically is canceling them out in favor of those who just take a very scientific, logical approach to whatever it is they see as driving existence. What's your perspective on that?
I would say there is a middle road that we must go. There is certainly the element of common sense that we should hold high. We cannot believe just everything, and we should. There are things that we should reject because they simply are beyond belief. But we don't have much left if there is no miracle, if there is no mystery, right. If there are no things that are beyond us that we cannot understand, then we rob religion from a very essential element. And so, yes, it is difficult sometimes to worship what we cannot understand, but at the same time, that's the very essence of believing in a God. And so that's also why I refer to my conviction that when people say virgin birth, that's impossible. Or when people say, well, you know, resurrection and ascension, etc. But what do we expect if it's really true that God became man? Then there's bound to be something inexplicable at the beginning and at the end. And for me, we cannot take that away without losing the essence of our faith.
Thank you.
All right, I just want to let Peter and Simona know I've added them to the queue. And Anastasia.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here again and for your courage. And I do have your book from your last time you were here, and it increased my belonging in this class as a whole because of the kind of nature of God that I believe in, and it's shown in Jesus Christ. And thank you for those criticism about Spong, Dr. Spong, and your beliefs. I agree on that. Two issues I may ask you. It's a huge difference between him and C.S. Lewis, for instance. I respect people.
Please say that again. I didn't understand.
I said I do respect. I respect C.S. Lewis much more in his Christian apologetics than him, about many reasons. One of them is that Spong has not studied the classics, and he made a very when they're not specific, his relativism is at least as bad as the extreme fundamentalism. He has made his own fundamentalism without having studied the classics, or some of the classics. Some, as Basil said in his admonition to the young, we must converse with poets, philosophers, etc., etc. And we have made antiquity servant to Christianity in order to convert them, and in order to take the good, the true, and the beautiful, in which he does not believe. And the difference of the classics and the extreme relativists is that the balance, as you said, that there is, and search, and that's the difference with C.S. Lewis, in the true, the good, and the beautiful, the ephemeral, for those things that have been present and will always be present, and which I see in Christ's teachings. And the same thing with fundamentalism. We cannot say in general, I regret fundamentalism, because what's fundamentalist, don't you think? What is fundamentalist for one person is not fundamentalist for another. I believe that how Jesus lived and what Jesus said are fundamental and in sync with the eternal, the good, the true, and the beautiful, where there are stories in the Old Testament especially, or cultural things, because also as a classicist, we know from the language that God inspired these people to write, did not dictate. And so those things that do not, Hayes, Dr. Hayes wrote about the moral issues in the New Testament, and he's a Methodist, I believe, and he suggests we study first the New Testament, go to the Old Testament, and what you mentioned last time you were here, I asked you about the nature of God. So there is the eternal, and there is the ephemeral, and the cultural. So it's like I learned at Newbold a great phrase: we should not throw out the baby with the water. And he does that, and certain fundamentalists do that. Don't you agree we have to have a balance? And thank you. I really love your book, and thank you for being here and your courage and this class and Dr. Lash and all these people, that some exiles like me can belong here too. Thank you.
Right. Well, those were not so much questions as comments, and thank you very much. But, you know, many people have said that Spong actually was not that a great theologian, and that he came to conclusions that maybe too quickly and without actually looking at the other options that would be available and that have been stressed by other theologians. But yeah, and let me say again, I do not here pretend to be a great expert on Spong or on the Episcopal Church or whatever, but well, having read that autobiography, I became kind of interested in him, and I hope I have conveyed the fact that there are many things in the way he operated that I admire.
Yes.
And but yeah, I wished that his theology would have remained more on the conservative side.
And thank you for bringing up those issues, because those issues, and that's the sad thing of it, so much of that is so true. These issues, these social issues that the Christian church, how can a Christian church be Christian like Christ when we have all those prejudices? So that took courage, and thank you for bringing them up. And thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Anastasia, and I apologize for my mispronunciation of your name earlier. You're very gracious.
Didn't. It's perfect. Anastasia or Anastasia.
Okay.
I'm bicultural. Thank you.
All right. Rod, you're up.
Actually, it's Sister Resurrection.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Thank you.
Reinder, thank you for that very well organized presentation. This is probably not going to show up the right way, but this is a book that I have carried in my library for 20 years, nearly 20 years, without opening it. John Shelby Spong, A New Christianity for a New World. And I've had to ask myself amongst all my reading, so why do I still carry this book, and will I ever read it? And why wouldn't I read it? And you and Stephen particularly gave me pretty much the answer that has decided whether I will or won't read it. And I probably will not read it. As Stephen, your questions were right down the line that I was thinking, and you articulated my thoughts very well. So I'm going to make a couple short statements, and there is no question here, but a little anecdote. This book belonged to my father-in-law, and he read this book, and it was the last book that he read before he left the Adventist church, stopped going to church, became an agnostic, possibly an atheist. Unfortunately, within a year or so, shifted into serious dementia, and so all religious thought and even discussion was lost. And within my own heart and mind, I feel sad that he possibly died without faith and hope. And so when he died and I was back in Australia, my brother-in-law asked me if I would like to look through his library for any books. And I said, I'm interested in religious books. And he set several aside. And I picked up this one here on Spong, and he asked me not to read it. And he said, this was the book whereby my father-in-law gave up faith and hope. And so I think that's why I sat on the library, because I was interested in what my father-in-law read before he died. But I remembered my brother-in-law's comments was, Rodney, please don't read it. And that there it is a challenge to me right away. I didn't say that. But my comment is on this. And my problem was, as I've thought about it, is where is the vibrant future that he upholds? I didn't see a vibrant or uplifting ending in what I read on the inside cover. What I read there was not really relevant to my thoughts. They were courteous comments, but I didn't think they were very insightful at all. So my problem is, where is the triumph? Where is the glory? There's no celebration of a liberation theology. There's no love. There's no increase in faith. No, no, no. All those fundamental things. I don't want to go down that journey. That's not my journey. That's not my ride at this stage in my life, and I don't feel defensive about it. I just don't feel it's going to give me any further edification. So yes, I agree with your comments you've made previously. Is that we as Adventists must endure. We shouldn't be shifting out of the church and into other churches. The attack on Christianity, and we've seen the Adventist church, is worldwide. It's universal. It involves the entire Christian movement. That's what's at stake here. So my commitment has been and will continue to be that I'm along for the ride, and I don't mind if it's a slow ride. Institutional behavioral theory points out very much that institutions need to change very slowly. That's the insurance against being captive to or falling to populist trend, even in theology. So I can deal with the frustration of a slow change, but I do believe that the Adventist church, along with other churches, the Christian movement will survive. The Adventist movement will survive because leadership will change. And if we're uncomfortable with leadership or have a problem with them, then it's the next generation that will enjoy the change of a new leadership. So I do believe there will be a new Adventism, a new vibrant Christianity, because there's no alternative, to it. I just mightn't be around to enjoy it, and I'm okay with that.
Okay. Well, I am an optimist by nature as well. And certainly, I will not give up on my church. At the same time, I feel that, David made a remark that to hope that the whole church, the entire church will move forward, that is not a very realistic hope, and may not even be a very good thing that we all just move in unison. But sometimes you feel that the church is going backward on a number of issues rather than going forward. And I think that means that those of us who see that must continue to have the courage to speak on that, and to do our little bit that we can do to encourage people. And yes, the church cannot move forward in its entirety. I realize that the church is a complex thing. There's so many different elements in the church, and we are at different stages of our journey. And that is why somehow, and I think some other churches are better in that, in allowing different groups, different elements in the church to move forward at different speeds, without telling them, no, if you do that, you're no longer part of us. It causes problems in other movements sometimes, but other movements are better in allowing for a different kind of speed in different regions of the world.
Yes, well, very well said. In the end, it comes down to people. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where a few people are trying to control the masses of Adventism, but they can't really do it because the church and its beliefs belong to the people. They come from the people, they're carried forward by the people who bear witness and give testimony and learn and study and grow. So these are immutable forces. What I think I don't want to cast aspersions here, but leadership will change. It will be forced to change. And the key thing is to continue to participate, continue to bear witness, and even join groups that put pressure on the hierarchy. That's all well and good. I don't believe the church will change the block, but there will be an immutable force, just like truth will eventually arise and will show itself, and that will happen. We don't know how, but will happen, I believe, for Christianity, and Adventism will be a portion of that change, and there will be a time of celebration.
Yeah.
And it's just not part of our journey. But I agree entirely with your comments and observations.
Thank you.
Okay, based on my gender balance priority, we're going to go to Simona and then followed by Peter. Simona.
Thank you. You said just a moment ago something that, about us not giving up on church. And I agree with that, but I often feel as a woman that church has given up on me long ago by not making me an equal.
Yeah.
And this is, however we want to talk about historical issues and how things are going to get better and so on. I live right now. What I feel right now is real to me. And so, it's like history will judge. Well, justice sometimes has to come now for people who live now so they can experience it and feel that there is something there. So that was just a brief comment on what you just recently said. In my experience, conservatism is exclusionary. And when we talk about discussion and talking about different views and polarization and so on, I have never met a liberal who said, well, I don't want to talk about it. But I have met many conservatives who just end the discussion. There is nothing to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I have lost friends because of my views about LGBTQ community. Simply because I believe that they should be seen as our equal, our brothers and sisters who should have a full right to have life and full life in our church and in society in which we live. And so, I'm not the one who ends the discussion. So how do you engage people who don't want to talk to you? Secondly, I think that both sides, liberal and conservative, often forget some of the basic tenets. And that's faith, hope, love. Neither of these three is rational. There is mystery in it. There is beauty in it. There is something that, faith is something that we believe in things we cannot see. Hope, we hope that things that we cannot understand will happen, and we'll love what we cannot understand. And so all these three are important. So we are not fully rational as human beings. Sometimes people try, it's almost like tearing the wing of a butterfly to see what makes it beautiful, and you lose the beauty in it. And sometimes you have people who they just look at the beauty of it, but don't see the complexity of it. That, that is the structure and the flight and the life cycle and so on of a butterfly. So I'm using this only as a metaphor. And so I think in all these things, we have to find a balance between what we think, what we feel, and, how we communicate with others. And finally, what we often talk about social issues, these are not social issues, these are human beings. And this is where I stand. That, regardless of where I stand as a person, and I have my own prejudices. I'm very imperfect and I accept it. But, my prejudice has to stop at the right of another human being to have a full life, be loved and be accepted. And so I believe that these so-called social issues, this is just a term that people use so that they can stop talking about people, real issues, people who are hurting, people who are excluded from our communities, people who are in pain because they're not seen as equal and not seen as accepted. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Those are a number of very insightful things that you have mentioned. Yes, the discussion between what we call liberals and what we call conservatives, of course, those are terms that are very imprecise, and we use them for want of better words. But unfortunately, I think there are on the liberal side many who are not really engaging seriously in a discussion with the more conservatives, and who in a way often look down upon people who are more conservative, in the sense of, okay, they are not as smart as we are, they are not as insightful as we are. That is, I think, something that we see quite often. So yeah, how do you get a dialogue going between people who are willing to listen to each other and not just shout to each other? Because that is often what happens. You feel that the church has given up on you. That is only true to a certain extent, because we are the church. We people are the church. It's not
Yes.
the people in Silver Spring who
Yes.
are the church. And so many of us in the church, we have not given up, and we are with you and supporting you. So yes, it's still a tragedy that we are where we are, but to say that that the church has given up on you, that statement is only partial true.
Okay, thank you. Peter.
Thank you for the presentation. Well, listening to what Spong was believing in, I was wondering how good his parishioners must have felt when they were listening to one of his sermons, when he told them that there is no personal God, there is no afterlife, there is no resurrection, there is no virgin birth, and a lot of other things that the Bible itself is talking about. What remains from his belief? And what hope, what encouragement he was giving to his parishioners. I am seriously thinking of that, and I have to declare that if I would have been in one of the pews there, I wouldn't feel very encouraged and very good listening to him, and how great theologian he really is.
Well,
for me, from what you were presenting, he was a rationalist. He believed, I mean, the statement that you are putting on, that what the mind cannot accept, we cannot worship. It is clearly a rationalist statement. He believed that the man is the measure of all things. And this statement is very far from what Luther, by example, believed, that calling reason a whore, or about the statement that credo ut intelligam. There is no mention of the word faith in what you presented. What is faith? Because Christianity without faith, I mean, it's occupying a very big space in our belief. He was looking at only at the things that the mind understand, but our mind is limited when we are talking about a God, when we are talking about transcendence and immanence of God. These are deep things, and just making so clear statements, clear-cut statements that only our mind can. We have to follow what our mind is helping us to understand. It's very radical.
Yeah. Well,
And I have a question.
yes.
You mentioned the process theology of Whitehead. Can you explain in a few words, elaborate a little bit on the process theology?
Well, I mentioned it as one of the sources that were influential in shaping the thinking of Spong. And as far as I understand it, process theology is actually pretty close to what you have been talking about also several times in your Sabbath school class, the open theism that, for instance, Dr. Rick Rice is defending. Those things are closely related. But I hope that you did not get the impression that I am defending the theology of Bishop Spong. On the contrary, I think I have made it quite clear that I do not agree with that theology. And when I say there are things that I admire in him, it is not his theological conclusions that he has come to. Why was he able to maintain himself in the Episcopalian community? That is actually a fascinating question. And even though he was controversial and he had many enemies, he remained a bishop for 21 years. And he was very successful earlier on in the various parishes where he served as a priest. And the impression that I have is that he was a good pastor. And even in his later years when he was bishop, his relationship to people on a personal level was, I think, very warm. And he was very genuinely interested in people and their personal problems. And so there was something extremely likable about him, apparently. And that may have been an important factor in continuing as a priest and even as a bishop. But there are some questions that I have, how he was able to maintain himself being so radical in his theology, certainly towards the end of his life.
Okay, let's go to Donna. And then McKinley, I see your hand up as well. Donna.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Donna.
Reinder, thank you so much. I think this is a good follow-up to your own book about doubt and believers on the edge. But I wanted to say something in response to Peter. I suspect, although I don't know, that Bishop Spong was not in the pulpit telling his congregation there is no afterlife. Christianity is full of wild tales, none of which are true. Probably there were many things I would guess he did not say, and that's why he continued. But and then maybe also in response to Simona, I maybe he's a rationalist, but God is rational, and or at least I define God as rational. And I suppose each of us to some extent defines him for ourselves. I think it's wrong to suggest that that people who find some things difficult to believe, as I have a lot of sympathy with Spong. I also don't find the virgin birth very likely. I don't have a great need to rail against it. It's just I set it aside and think of it as very unlikely. I have trouble with the resurrection in the same way. I have trouble with the incarnation in the same way, but I'm not sure there's anything much better. And this is the doorway in which I was raised. And so this is where I stay, not exactly stand, but maybe sit. because there's nowhere to go from here except into a kind of outer darkness, and that is not itself appealing. But that's all. It's only a comment, and I also add my thanks because it's been a very good presentation. Thank you.
May I just add something? I didn't say that God is not rational or that we are not rational. I just said that we are not only rational.
I understand, Simone, that you didn't say that, but you did reduce Spong to, quote, a rationalist, which is not the same as not being rational. I understand that. Sorry, I didn't mean to misrepresent you.
Well, it's good to hear your voice, Donna.
Yeah.
And when I hear you talking about these theological topics, my thought is that maybe it's about time that I come as your pastor to visit you and set you straight.
Oh, please do. Please do. If I'm anxious, I want to see you sitting in the kitchen at 5 o'clock in the morning, doing your email and dare I say, drinking coffee and explaining. So set me straight. Come right away and do that, please.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, McKinley.
Thank you, Monty. Thank you, Elder Bruinsma, for your usual insightful presentation. There's a lot to say about this gentleman, but I would not say. I do have a quick question. Looking at the 12 theses of Mr. Spong, I guess that's how you say his name, and thinking about the question of discipline in the Adventist church, do you think that someone who is a pastor of the Adventist church who espouses the 12 elements of Spong's position can remain an Adventist pastor, should remain an Adventist pastor?
When you make it that specific, then I cannot see how somebody can function as an Adventist pastor holding the 12 theses of Spong. And I find it very unlikely that somebody who has come to these conclusions has not left the church a long time ago. But, you know, at the same time, I think we ought to be very careful with disciplining people. And we have a situation now in the church that many people do not dare to speak their mind because they are afraid that they'll be considered as heretics and that they may have serious problems if they do speak their mind. And so there are far too many who have one truth in their head that they will keep silent about and something else that they will talk about or preach about. And we all have some of that. You know, you have to be honest, but you don't have to be stupid. And so you don't have to talk about everything all the time to anyone. But at the same time, there must be the possibility to speak your mind, to be honest about what you believe. And the church must accept that there is a certain amount of discomfort when that happens. But now, we were just, Afy and I, we were just in Australia. I'm surprised. I'm really surprised at the fact that when you talk to people in the church leaders and others, that the fourth issue is still so much alive in Australia. And there are so many who have told me, well, I actually believe what Dr. Ford said, but I keep quiet because it will give me problems. 200 pastors left the church as a result of the Ford crisis. Now, I don't want to compare Spong with Ford. There are many differences, and of course, his theology, Ford's theology, was very conservative in many ways. But for me, it's a prime example that if the church could have tolerated these viewpoints, and if we could have discussed these openly and honestly, we would have avoided a lot of problems, a lot of pain. And so discipline, well, when people are so far away from what we as a community believe, then people will either go away or we will have to help them to go away. But as far as the discussion about theological issues is concerned, that within certain parameters, yes, we should be very careful in stopping the discussion and letting the discussion go underground. We must accept the risks that are there. That there may be some problems, but well, that's my honest opinion.
Thank you. I just wonder if I can just make a second comment, maybe 5 seconds, Dave, just a quick follow-up. So my experience, in the Adventist church is that I think dissenting views can be allowed, embraced. The manner in which such dissenting views are expressed, whether they tend to be disruptive or not, I think could probably explain some of the challenges that people of dissenting views have experienced. But I know that I have expressed some dissenting views in my leadership role, and the church has been willing to work through them. So yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
Okay.
All right. I'm not sure if Donna still has another question. Dave, we're at 12:35. Would you like us to stop at this point and transition into potluck?
If Donna has something more to say, let's hear from her and then let's quit.
All right, Donna.
Apparently not. We can't hear you, Donna.
She muted back, so I think that means that she's finished.
Okay, let's conclude. And since I get to have the concluding remarks, I would like to make these. First of all, to Peter, there are 2 answers I can give to him about what Alfred North Whitehead believed. The first answer I can give you is to read my 256-page dissertation on Alfred North Whitehead's thought. That's the first thing. The second answer is this. Alfred North Whitehead's philosophy was an attempt to overcome Descartes' dualism. Okay, you can read my sentence, you can read my dissertation, or you can take that one sentence and you've got it, either way. Secondly,
it will be very interesting, Dave. It will be very interesting.
Yeah, well, I think we could have fun. I would like to say something to Donna about the virgin birth, and that is this. To the people of the Bible days, the virgin birth doctrine was not a biological doctrine, it was a political doctrine. All the leaders of the time, national empire leaders, were eventually described as having had a divine birth. So when people heard about the virgin birth in New Testament times, they did not ask themselves, well, how did this happen biologically? They said, oh, Jesus is the king, not Caesar. So that's the point of the virgin birth story. Okay, thirdly, I had the opportunity some time ago, I would say the honor, to be among those who wrote something about Reinder in tribute to his long and distinguished ministry. And as I thought about that, I realized I would have to choose one word that would characterize his ministry as a whole. And the word I chose has come up this morning, and I feel very wise for having chosen that word. The word is balance. Balance. That's what's characterized Reinder's ministry from the beginning to the end. Balance. Not too far this way, not too far that way, but finding the middle road and inviting us all to stay there on the middle road. So, Reinder, thank you for being a balanced person and for having a balanced ministry. Thank you very much. Would you like to say something before we quit?
Well, you say that you were talking about from the beginning to the end. Well, I hope the end is still far away, but I will try to retain that balance. And well, you know, when you refer to that particular section of Spectrum, I was surprised that they asked so many people to respond, and I was really felt honored, but also the praise that was given was way beyond what I had expected and probably earned. Anyway, it was good to be with your group again tonight, this morning, and I wish you all well, and God bless you.
Okay, thank you so much. Here is the benediction. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.
Elder
All right,
Bruinsma,
Yes, yes.
do you have to leave, or are you able to spare a few minutes?
I can spare a few minutes.